Shit, what I say now, boss. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, the world to you. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within.
The story of migration, the story of emigrating and immigrating, is a basic, fundamental, ubiquitous, big, foundational story of the history of human beings, the history of mammals and other animals in general, the story of the hunter and gatherer moving from pasture to pasture, hunting ground to hunting ground, is a migration story. The story of the spread of human beings from Africa all through the globe is a migration story. And within the modern context, nation states with their borders, language, and culture and immigrants coming in, penetrating, infiltrating these borders, bringing new languages and culture is a basic story. It is an issue, a big sociological, political, economic issue. But today we're going to focus on the psychological aspect. We're going to focus on the first person perspective aspects of this. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ike Ogiamin, and over here, we talk about being better and doing better with a strong emphasis on doing. And what are we doing today? Today we're exploring the immigrant story from the first person perspective, what makes that immigrant tick. Not the big picture things that we know, the economic, the sociological, the political, if you will, but we're going to be talking about the psychology of the immigrant as such. So I am broadcasting live today from Addis Ababa, where it is, I believe, 4 a.m. out here in Ethiopia. And we are doing well. So shout out to each and every one of you joining the broadcast today. Let me see what's going on over here, and then we will head right into this particular topic here. Ladies and gentlemen. Excellent. Seems like the internet is serving us well. So let's go ahead. Okay? And as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about, from a psychological perspective, what is the immigrant's experience? Nothing new or groundbreaking, but we're just going to isolate the individual and talk about them, as opposed to the big, grand narratives of world migration, the political, the economic narratives, and so on and so forth. Build the wall or not build the wall. H1B1, right? Those stories which we know quite well. But what is the mentality of the migrant? So obviously everything we're going to be talking about today is going to be general, and is going to affect each migrant only in a question. The only way in which it'll differ from migrant to migrant is a question of degree. So this is true, dare I say. Yes, I'm going to make the big claim that this is true. Everything that I'm going to say here today about immigration and the inferiority and superiority complex of the immigrant is true for all immigrants. It just changes in two dimensions. One is a question of degree, and the other is a question of consciousness or unconsciousness. So one may be more driven to be accepted by the dominant group, by the majority, if you will. And another may be less driven, but the drive to be accepted, regardless of how we may deny it, the drive to be accepted by the dominant group is almost a biological need that we have. Can I get a 1 in the chat if this aspect is clear here? Each individual psychology will be different. But what I'm about to say about the immigrant is true for all immigrants. It'll just vary in terms of degree and then consciousness or unconsciousness. Some people will be driven by things that they're conscious of, others not so conscious of. But what I'm going to be saying about the immigrant as such is true. Now, in order to get into the minute, we're going to start from the basic things that we know from the outside, right? The things which we're not going to be focusing on today, which is the immigrant mentality, for example, which is something that is common in at least American parlance, right? Hey, those Russian Americans over there, these Indian Americans, the Korean Americans, the Chinese Americans, the Nigerian Americans, okay? They have the immigrant mentality, a mentality of pragmatism and a mentality of getting stuff done, a cutthroat mentality, if you will, a strict mentality. That kind of thing that is looking from the outside in. Looking from the outside in, that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're not talking about the fact that, the immigrants move differently. Okay, they move differently from the dominant culture. How does this particular immigrant group move? What are the particular outcomes? What do they focus on? So on and so on and so on. That is not what we're talking about today. No, that is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the perspective from the inside. The individual, how he relates with the dominant group, the society to which he has migrated, and the society from whence he came. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we're talking about. So we're not talking about whether or not they stay true to their culture, more or less so. Well, the Indians seem to assimilate more, while the Chinese are more insular, and this particular group focuses more on this particular economic sector and that one not so much. No, no, no. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the individual and his psychology. Okay? Now, in order to have a certain framework with which we can have this discussion, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to refer to our favorite Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we're going to mention, and I'm going to ask for a 1 here if this is clear. Shout out to Red Sings the Blues in the house. Shout out to It's Okay to Be Happy in the house, and to everyone in the house, ladies and gentlemen. Let me see and make sure that everything is still going smoothly. Let me see and make sure that everything is still going smoothly. So, I'm going to ask that if we watch the movements of the immigrant, first generation immigrant that is, that we can notice that the first generation immigrant is focusing on the lower ends of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we look at this hierarchy of needs with things such as self-actualization on the top, and then below that you have self-esteem and respect and dignity and things like that, at the bottom, you're coming in and you're trying to put your foot on the ground, establish shelter, food, in other words, some basic economic parameters. Is it fair to say, and again, we're talking big picture and we're talking from the outside looking in, and then we're going to go into the mentality of the immigrant, but is it fair to say that the immigrant, writ large, the immigrant as such, in any society tends to be focusing on the lower aspects of Maslow's hierarchy? Because this is the big source, I would say, or the big factor that shapes his relationship with the environment to which he has immigrated, the environment from which he emigrated, and also how he views himself. There is a basic aspect of focusing on the lower aspects of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first generation immigrant, that is. So, we are going to talk about the immigrant psychology, how these external factors which we know so well impinges upon him, gives him a certain inferiority and superiority complex. Those two things tend to go hand in hand, because in life, there is no perfect balance. Well, balance has to do with trade-offs, right? Balance has to do with trade-offs. And there is no perfect solution. So a superiority complex is the flip side of an inferiority complex. And we're going to talk about it rather straightforwardly, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to break it down into 2 halves. We're going to talk about the cultural aspects that affect him. And we're going to talk about the economic aspects that affect him and make him act the way he acts. We're looking again at a psychological perspective, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Nicer in the house. Pow, pow, pow. Let me see here. Shout out to Nicer in the house. Shout out to Aitois in the house. So, the internet seems to be holding up. Let's go deeper into this particular. Yes. So, just to state again, first generation immigrants focused on the lower needs on Maslow's hierarchy. Yes. Okay? And we should now move forward and talk about. Let's consider Ling Ling and my friend here, Emeka from Nigeria. And Ling Ling from, you might be able to guess where Ling Ling is from. They are immigrants. We're not talking about the differences between these two. We're talking about them as a group and what they share in common in terms of their psychology. We're going to talk about them and the factors that affect them. First of all, starting with the cultural aspects of how they're affected and how it affects their psychology. And then we're going to talk about the economic aspects. Okay? Now, what do I mean by the cultural aspects? Okay? The cultural aspects are simple, and they begin with the fact that Emeka and Ling Ling are not the majority group. Can I get a 1 in the chat? Can I get questions, comments, concerns? Is it clear that a big aspect of the external set of circumstances that affect an immigrant is the fact that wherever they migrate to, they find themselves being a minority by definition. They are going in as a minority. They are not the majority group either by number or by power. Each society already has its set of majority groups and minority groups. And the immigrant is always one amongst the other of the minority groups by number and by power. And sometimes number and power are one and the same thing, but it is not always the case. A lot of times the majority group, as I said, is also the more powerful group by definition. Okay, so by the way, let me just go ahead and state that this is not a racial thing, okay? The majority group everywhere always tends to have more power, always tends to have more privilege. So rather than talk about, let's say, white privilege, just say majority privilege. It is what it is. Not everything needs to be racialized all the time, because then you are stunted in terms of how you can universalize principles. If you keep looking at things through the view of black and white, then you forget that it's just a numbers game. If you keep looking at things through the point of view of black and white, then you forget that tribalism exists everywhere. Okay? And it's just a basic genetic factor. Now, but the main thing that my friend Emeka from Nigeria and Ling Ling from China share is the fact that they emigrated, let's say, to, or should I say, immigrated into America, emigrated from China and Nigeria, and immediately they are a minority. This is an important key cultural aspect that the immigrant cannot escape from. This affects his psychology in what ways? What ways? Okay? What ways? Well, one of the basic ways that this affects, and this is something as my friend here, Taco Bell Dog, great name. As Taco Bell Dog points out too, this is something that people don't really like to talk about. Upfrontly, we talk about the immigrant story from a sociological perspective, from a political perspective. Do I close the border? Do I open the border? How about the language and the culture? How about these different groups? What do they bring to the table? So on and so on and so on. Which one is more insular? Which one tends to assimilate more? Right? Which one is giving us trouble? Which one is not giving us trouble? Right? Whom is more successful? Nigerian Americans, most successful immigrant group. Ha ha ha. Those kinds of things we tend to talk about. Well, we don't talk about the individual and their psychology. The fact is, the mere fact that the immigrant is not the majority group means that they are encouraged to differentiate themselves from other minorities. Can I get a 1 in the chat if this particular point here is clear? Okay? So Ling Ling comes from China. Emeka comes from Nigeria. He comes here. He is immediately one of the minority groups. Whether consciously or unconsciously, he begins to differentiate himself from the other minority groups. Oh, I am Nigerian, and again, whether consciously or unconsciously, and also it's a question of degree because we're speaking in generalities here. It is true for everybody, but it's going to vary in degree. I am Nigerian. I am not African American. I am not Caribbean. Okay. Oh, I am Chinese. I am not these Korean immigrants. I am not this other minority. I'm going to try to differentiate myself from other minorities. This is something, a program, if you will, that runs in the minds, that drives anyone in a minority group, but we're talking about the immigrant in particular. The immigrant in particular, ladies and gentlemen. And let's see here. Shout out to Taco Bell Dog. Shout out to you. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. And Red Sings the Blues. Oh, I almost says gonna hit the playback. Red Sings the Blues. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, shoot me that email, Red. Shoot me that email. Chalupa. Yes. Immediately you get into that space that isn't your space, and you are not the majority, you are a minority. What do you begin to do? You want to differentiate yourself from other minorities. Let me give you another example. We know that tribalism, okay, tribalism, racism, okay, which is just a form of tribalism, right? And all these other kinds of schisms between people is most pronounced at the lower rung of things. Now, what I mean by that is, it is kind of well understood that the most racist, let's say racist white people, in terms of their manifestation of racism, tend to be those that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. So that they're closer to being a minority group. Now, in terms of power, people who don't have power need to differentiate themselves from other people who don't have power, because they're struggling, if you will, for that, for the little bit of scraps. Can I get a 1 in the chat? And this is just an example, okay? Because we're focusing on the migrant, we're not focusing on other aspects of differences between people. But whenever someone comes into a space and they are a minority, they are going to immediately, it's a psychological defense mechanism, differentiate yourself from other minority groups. It is a power game, if you will. Now, how does the immigrant do this? Okay, the immigrant is going to emphasize, okay, cultural differences, right? Ling Ling is going to say, I'm hardworking and I'm industrious and I emphasize education. Same thing with Emeka from Nigeria, right? They're going to emphasize certain cultural differences. However subtle they may be, however relevant they may be, doesn't really matter. And these are cultural differences that play well to the majority group. Okay? They're not just picking any cultural difference, like, oh, well, I wear my hat this way, or I do this. No. They pick something that'll help them assimilate into the majority group as a means of differentiating themselves. Can I get an amen? Can I get a 1? Okay? This is no shade. This is simple survival technique here. You come into a society. You are not the majority. You are a minority. You need to differentiate yourself from other minorities, and you're going to differentiate yourself from other minorities by emphasizing certain things that play well to the majority group, whomever that majority group may be. It doesn't matter whom the majority group is. So some people may say, hey, Emeka is always like doing things to appease the white man. Doesn't matter that it's white or blue or green. It just matters that whomever the majority group is, I'm going to emphasize certain aspects of my culture that aligns with that, and I'm going to use that to differentiate myself from the other minorities. Right? That's kind of how the game goes. Shout out to Bijou Noir in the house. Yes. And when I come back stateside, I'll get you your song. Your song will be ready. But in my sojourn across the East and West Africa, I don't have my tools. But yes, the migrant. Okay? So there is the idea that what this person is thinking is, oh, they're simping for the white man. Ling Ling is simping for the white man, trying to be the model minority. Oh yeah, these Nigerians are simping for, they love the white man. It's like, no, anybody coming from the outside, finding himself as a minority, will want to differentiate himself from other minorities using particular cultural aspects that align with the majority because why wouldn't you? What would you have them do? And again, there is a question of degree, as I said. There's a question of degree because individuals vary. But this is true. I said it's going to vary in two ways, degree and also consciousness. Some people are conscious of this. Some people are unconscious of it. I think it's always better to be conscious of what drives you, even if you have no control over it, but at least you can watch it happen as opposed to be completely oblivious of what's going on. So, again, cultural aspects, and then we'll talk about economic aspects. It's not going to be a long one, okay? Again, greetings from Addis Ababa. The Ethiopian internet seems to be holding up. So, Ling Ling is going to emphasize his, I'm good with the education stuff. I am great at math. I am an industrious person. You can rely on me on this, that, and the other. Those are the aspects of his culture. Those are the aspects of his particular milieu or what he's bringing to the table that he's going to emphasize. Why? Because it is easier for him to assimilate that way. It is a struggle for assimilation. It is a struggle for acceptance. It is a struggle to not be stuck in that minority status. Right? Right? And then there's a subtle thing that happens here, whereby Emeka from Nigeria will say, hey, these Americans are lazy, right? These Americans don't really, this is a big one amongst Nigerians. They say things like Americans don't have culture. And I'm talking about they're talking about the dominant group in America now. They're talking about America, big picture America, right? They say Americans don't have culture. Have you guys ever heard that one? That is a very funny one to me, because it is a sign of an inferiority complex, okay? So you are trying to seek acceptance. You're trying to get out of this minority status game. You're fighting with these other minorities. You're trying to differentiate yourself. You're trying to say, hey, look at me. I got these things I'm bringing to the table. It helps me assimilate. It's in alignment with the dominant group. But at the same time, because, human beings, we tend to do that kind of superiority, inferiority, seesaw type deal. Yes. That is true. Yes, they say that about African Americans. They also say it about Americans in general too. They say it about Europeans. They'll say it about the white man, if you will. And these are people that are, going to church and watching CNN and okay, and they're dressing in their white man clothes. Point is, they still say things like, there is no culture. Why are they doing this? It's a psychological kind of way of easing themselves, if you will, right? It makes them feel a little bit better to say, hey, I am culturally superior. I have culture, I'm close to my culture, whatever that means. And it's also a trope of tribal peoples. Tribal peoples always feel like they have culture, and that people in larger groups that are, let's say, non-tribal, right? They look at those people as not having culture, even though in reality, the culture in which you are swimming in every day, day by day, the language you speak, as someone says, speak in English. They're going to use English to tell the white man, that he has no culture. So this is just a psychological little trope. Again, it'll vary in degree and it'll vary in level of consciousness, but this is true of everyone, okay, who finds themselves in this particular position, okay. The reasons why these things are not openly spoken about is obvious because, people don't like to talk about their inferiority complexes. People don't like to talk about the fact that their superiority complex is just a compensation for the inferiorities that they feel, right? So, what have we talked about so far? We said that we're looking at the immigrant from the inside, from the first person perspective. We're looking at his psychology. We're not just talking about big picture economics, sociology, politics. We're talking about psychology. And when you come in to this particular landscape of looking at the psychology, there's certain things that affect the immigrant. One of which is the culture that he's coming into. He is the minority by definition. The minority in terms of numbers and also by minority in terms of power. And then he has to differentiate himself from all other minorities. It's just a defense mechanism. Whether he knows it or not, that's what he's doing. To the degree to which he does it or not, it's still part of the driving motivation, right? And you're going to emphasize certain aspects of your particular culture that is in alignment with the dominant group. It is a mistake, let's say African Americans, for example. It's a mistake for them to look at Emeka, the Nigerian immigrant, and say, oh, he's trying to assimilate because he loves the white man or something. It's like, whatever society you're in, there is a dominant group in terms of number of power, okay? And when you have migrated there, and we get into the reasons why people migrate in a second, it would be the economic part. While you're there, what would you have them do? Not, to just be, to not blend or assimilate or try to separate themselves. No, this is true of all life. All life seeks power. And by power, okay, we did that whole stream called the will to power, right? Differentiation, your ability to be individuated, your ability to be somebody, if you will, and then make your own moves, clear your own path. This is what life does. So it's going to happen automatically, even if these people are completely blind to the process that is taking place. But while they're doing this, separating themselves from other groups, okay, seeking acceptance in the dominant majority group, they're still going to play this game of feeling superior to that group, to the group that to where they migrated to, and the whole culture thing is a big one, especially with tribal peoples. They always think that their culture is more culture than anyone else's culture, and fine. Shout out to Young Swift in the house. Yes, there are many levels and many layers of misunderstanding that take place, generally speaking, okay? Now, part of the inferiority complex and part of the whole aspect of let's say the accent, okay? The accent. Ling Ling cannot necessarily express himself in all the little subtleties of the English language. Maybe Emeka has a strong Igbo accent or something, right? And Ling Ling shows up to school one day with some fish dish that doesn't smell so good in terms of the perceptions of the dominant group. Right? We all know those foods that don't smell so good. Yes, the Nigerians have a couple of those. All other cultures, in terms of from the perspective of other peoples, have those foods, and those things matter. Okay, the food, the clothing is different. Even if you're wearing the same clothes that those other people are wearing, you wear it in a different way. So Young Swift catches Ling Ling in the cafeteria, and Young Swift starts bullying Ling Ling, talking about, damn, son, What you eating, man? Smells like 10 dead savages in here. Come on, bruh. These aspects of Ling Ling's culture, he does not emphasize. He's not going to go out of his way to emphasize those because those are not things, obviously, that help him to assimilate into the dominant culture. Okay? These are things that he's going to be self-conscious about. There's an aspect of self-consciousness that is there, always. And young Swift is going to make sure he points it out. Every chance he gets, he's going to point out Emeka's accent. He's going to talk about how black the African looks. You know, it's blacker than blacker than under my bed or whatever the black is. That is going to be emphasized. These things are going to have a certain restriction on the movements, if you will, okay? You see, because Ling Ling wants to be able to eat his fish anywhere, but you see, he can't just bust out that fish and microwave it anywhere because he knows that people are going to be like, whoa, Ling Ling, what's that smell? These things he does not emphasize. He will emphasize, okay, other aspects of his culture that helps him to assimilate. And that helps him to differentiate in a positive way himself from other minority groups. I'm not like these other minority groups. That's just natural. It's what happens. And again, the point is, the world is bigger than America, even though I'm using America as an example here. But that these things, when it comes to groups of people migrating and so on and so forth, age-old story, tribalisms, separations, other schisms of other sorts are ubiquitous. They're worldwide. They're everywhere. It just turns out to be the case that in America, people tend to look at things in the black and white, like literally, like it's a black thing or a white thing. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's a bigger picture thing. It's majority, minority. It's tribal. Okay, people get tribal over football teams, for crying out loud. People will get tribal over just about anything. Okay? Especially tribal people such as Africans, for example. You want to see tribalism? Okay, go to Africa. Watch my last stream with Ibrahim, where and we're going to have some more about it. We're talking about how to bridge the gap, you know, how to create that sameness. It is not something crazy or something to, shall we say, speak ill of. It is a simple feature of the fact that people are tribal people. When you are a tribal person, you're going to be individualistic. When I say tribal, what I mean is indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples, whether they're Aborigines, whether they're Native Americans, if you will, or whether they're Africans, tend to be more tribal and therefore individualistic, more, well, me and my cousin and my people against everybody else, that kind of a thing. Okay, and when you see that play out over and over and over again, when you grew up in the milieu where that's kind of a commonplace, you tend to understand that that's just natural human behavior, and it has nothing to do with any particular special group of people that are just super tribal. It's like, no, everyone is, and especially indigenous peoples. Okay, the Native Americans were more tribal, right, than the white man. Africans are more tribal than the so-called white man, right? No, nothing controversial there. Nothing controversial there. So far we've talked about the cultural aspects that impinge upon the psychology of the immigrant, that make him think, move a certain way. And this is from a first-person perspective. We're not talking about the immigrant mentality writ large. We know, okay, that he focuses on the bottom part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's the part we're going to get into right now. The bottom parts of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I need some food, clothing, shelter, nice clean water, breathing room, some security, literal actual security and economic security. I need some money. That's why people come here to just put their foot on the ground. The majority group tends to be, or not the majority group, but the natives of a land tend to be focused on other things. And that's another big source of misunderstanding. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I re-emphasize this aspect, lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy, because we're going to talk about the economics now. We just talked about the culture right now. We said, hey, culturally speaking, they are not the majority group. Hence, they're encouraged to differentiate themselves from other minorities. They're trying to assimilate, but at the same time, they do this flip thing where they kind of say, hey, Americans don't have culture, right? Blah, 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 whatever it may be. It's just a little psychological game to the degree to which it may or may not be true, subjectively speaking, even if you can create objective parameters by which someone has more culture than another. Doesn't really matter. The point is, it's just a psychological crutch, is the point. Now, the economic circumstances is what we're going to talk about, and that's why I said Maslow's hierarchy. That's why I re-emphasized it before we got here, right? Now, you see, Emeka and Ling Ling, they came here for economic opportunities. Okay? You're trying to open those shops. They're going to go ahead and get that education. They're going to go ahead and get that money. They're always focused on these particular things. The natives, though, are focused on higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy. For example, there tends to be a schism between, let's say, Nigerians or other African immigrants and African Americans when it comes to political movements. Because, and let me get a one in the chat if this is clear. You guys may already see where I'm going with this. In Maslow's hierarchy, when you're focused on the bottom level, you just put your foot on the ground. You're trying to get yourself established. That's what you're focused on, so you become very good at it, right? You get very good at making that money because that's what you're focused on. Because you do need to send money back home, by the way, right? You're not busy agitating for things like self-esteem and rights and dignity and let's go march. No. And what tends to happen is there's a misunderstanding. So the African Americans might think, oh, these Africans are not for us. They don't want to be part of us. They're just, well, give them 3 or 4 generations. You need to give them 3 or 4 generations. The first generation immigrant is not at all in the realm of the higher needs, like, oh, I need self-esteem and dignity in this society, and I'm going to go march and do politics. Number one, the political process of any particular society has a history, a big history, most of which this particular immigrant person has nothing to do with. Their histories, their factions, their levers to pull, their associations, their collaboration, all kinds of things that have been going on before this guy arrived. This guy arrived to get money here, send to his people, establish himself, lay down a solid foundation, lower rungs of Maslow's hierarchy. He has no view whatsoever to those higher things there. The natives, whom are established, okay, have different priorities. And they tend to think that, oh my God, these Nigerians just, they're just simping for the majority group. They love the white man. How come they're not out here marching with us? Well, the immigrant did not come here to march. And the reason I'm doing this from a psychological perspective is so that rather than just look at things from a big group perspective, think about Ling Ling and Emeka and think about what's going through their head. Think about the fact that Emeka came out of a village somewhere. Ling Ling maybe came out of Wuhan in China. All right? They have a family back home there. They're here to establish themselves in a certain way. They're thinking about their immigration status and their papers and this and that. You're going to come to him and you're going to start telling him about certain political things. It's almost like a foreign language. No pun intended. It's a foreign language to the psychology of the first generation immigrant, and perhaps even the second generation immigrant. Give them about 3 generations. When they're established, Ling Ling is a grandfather now. Maybe Ling Ling is passed on. He set up a string of, businesses, donut shops and, dry cleaning businesses and so on and so forth. His children now, his children's children, his grandchildren can now sit and be like, dignity and self-esteem, and why should I need more representation in this place, and I should agitate for these more rights, and so on and so on. Right? That is how it tends to be. Ling Ling no understand, man. Ling Ling no understand. Ling Ling trying to get that dollar. Ling Ling got to send dollar back home. And Ling Ling also got to establish here quicker than you do. Ling Ling cannot fall back on some family structure. He has nobody here per se, right? His focus is absolutely different. To expect him to be about other things which you're about is, a typical human type error. But to the degree to which we're not interested in continuing in our error, it is an error that we should check, right? It's an error that we should check. So, let me see what's going on here. Yeah, you're right. A lot of immigrants don't know. Yeah, they might not even be able to vote. There is a lot of under the table type paperwork going on. They're not yet established in terms of having the real papers and so on and so forth. And this is true. If you're an immigrant, this is just true of all immigrant populations, right? It's just part of the deal, right? It's just part of the deal. So, economically speaking, they are here for opportunity. That's why they left. That's why they took the long journey. That's why they left their particular border, their particular culture, coming over to a place with a different language and a different culture, infiltrating a border. They're here for a mission, tends to be an economic one, okay? We already said before how then they will use their economic prowess as a way of saying, hey, look at me. I'm a good minority, right? I am industrious. I am frugal with my money. I am hardworking. I focus on education, so on and so forth, right? As a way of kind of easing the inferiority complex, because there is always a question, isn't there? Let me get a one in the chat again. Okay, and this is not going to be a long one, ladies and gentlemen. Just wanted to, as a continuation of the conversation I had with Jay Ibrahim last time, to talk about the immigrant, because I think it's part of this whole working together thing. Okay, talk about bringing these different tribes together, but also, how about the diaspora, right? Understanding where the immigrant is coming from, and also helping certain immigrants understand themselves. There's always a sense of what is wrong with where you're from. Can I get a one in the chat? Right? You are over here for opportunities. What does that mean? That means that wherever you're from, there's something wrong with the landscape of opportunities, right? This is something that is always in the back of every immigrant. This one is more conscious than not. So I mentioned that everything that I'm saying is true for all immigrants. It's only going to vary in terms of 2 parameters, in terms of degree and in terms of level of consciousness. This one tends to be the more conscious one because you cannot, it is very practical. If you left for opportunity, what's wrong with you where you left from? So you may see young Swift going to Emeka, the Nigerian immigrant, and say, why don't you go back to Nigeria and make it better if you're so good, huh? Right? Isn't that right, young Swift? Isn't that what you said to him? You said, why don't you go back to Nigeria and make it better. Well, if you guys are so good talking about, oh, best, immigrant group, oh, you guys are so good, why don't you go about that kind of shit, right? So there is always that sword of Damocles, if you will, hanging over the heads that can always be dropped down because someone can always say, what the hell's wrong with where you came from? And we're not going to get into the particulars of where anyone came from or what may be wrong with that. The fact is, people move for opportunity. Even within the United States, people move for opportunity as well. So, it is what it is. This is going to be another source of the inferiority, okay? And a reason why that economic drive is so strong. They're here for that reason. They're not just doing this for themselves. You got to always remember that, right? There's something called the immigrant tax, which means they have to support family. It may be big, it may be small, but there's always some money going outside, let's say in this case of the United States. Remittances, as it is called. And a lot of middlemen like Western Union just taking fees. I don't know how many billions, but somebody can easily Google it. Goes from the United States to Mexico every year. And simply for transferring that money, Western Union makes fat money. Now, in 2021, and pardon me for taking this tangent, in 2021, transferring money should be like sending an email. In fact, it is like that. But for the fact that you have these centralized places, okay, and that can play middlemen, okay, like we were living in the 1800s, where people have to keep records, and we have these centralized places that play middlemen, and then they can charge you money. But it should be like sending an email. That's why cryptocurrency and the blockchain, by the way, writ large, regardless of what you think about a particular cryptocurrency, but the blockchain in general will kind of destroy a lot of the middlemen within the financial sector. And that's something that we are rooting for, generally speaking. But yes, the immigrant tax, sending money out to the homeland, if you will, is a strong impetus why they have to make it. They got to make it for themselves. They got to make it for those other people out over there. Okay. They know that there is that thing about, well, how about where you're from? How come you don't go back over there and make it better? So on and so forth. That's that inferiority thing that goes on. So you make sure that you push hard and you better make it so that you can then play that superiority card and be like, ha ha ha, I made it, right? This is how the psychology works. This is the psychology of the immigrant. To the degree to which he may be conscious of this, who knows, right? But it makes sense. As human beings, we can intuitively see. We can intuitively see, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Shan Joe in the house. Shout out to everyone who showed up today to talk about this particular topic. Take a sip of the sparkling water. Migration is a key story. It is the history of human beings spreading out of Africa. It is the history of us as hunters and gatherers moving from pasture to pasture. History of as nomads, if you will. A big political, sociological, economic topic. Borders, language, culture. Big deal. However, the immigrant and his psychology is rarely spoken of in a very poignant way. It is talked about in narrative, and there are many books, literature, stories, if you will, right? Fiction, if you will, written about this kind of stuff. But just to state it directly like this is rarely done, to talk about the inferiority and superiority complex and what it stems from. Indeed, indeed, indeed. So, as I mentioned, he has to succeed because this is why he came. Okay? So, two things that we said we were going to use as the external factors that affect the immigrant's mentality and how he goes about viewing himself. Okay? Number one, he is not the majority. He comes in and he becomes immediately minority status in terms of numbers and power. Numbers, power, influence, all kinds of things. Sometimes even rights, depending on immigration status, right? So there is a psychological need, a life need, if you will, to immediately start competing with others at that lower end. Competition is fierce at the lower end, just as it also is at the very top. It's in the middle class, and in the middle, and by middle class I'm talking about economic, but also in the middle of any kind of competitive distribution is where people get all milk toast and soft. In the bottom, it's rough and tumble, and also at the very top is rough and tumble. So, needs to differentiate himself, right? And is seeking assimilation, differentiating himself from other minorities, using attributes of his culture that are in line with the majority. Saying, hey, Mr. Majority Man, look at me. I can do these things. I'm not like these other people over here. That kind of a thing, right? While at the same time denigrating not just the minorities, but also the majority, talking about how your culture is more culture than their culture, which is stupid because you're speaking their language and wearing their clothes and going to their like it's just it's silly. But this is kind of what's going on psychologically, right? Because in reality, on your day-to-day things as simple as what you wear, what you eat, your accent, so on and so forth, these things are a source of friction in terms of how you live in this new society that you've come into. And then we talk about the economic aspects of things, okay? And using Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a way of guiding us through, we say, hey, if you are focused on the lower aspect of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're going to have some friction with some other established natives that are also minorities, okay? Because those established natives that are also minorities will have certain political ends, which you don't have. You have economic ends as your primary focus. Now, if people are smart, they would learn from each other, wouldn't they? Can I get a one in the chat? Can I get a one in the chat if that was clear? I just said some people have economic ends, and they tend to be very good at it because that's what they're here for, because they better make it, because they got to send money. Ling Ling's grandmother needs money. So Ling Ling and his crew get really good at taking advantage of all the opportunities, okay? And then these other people whom have other needs that they focus on, such as like dignity and esteem and so on and so forth, they are good at doing those and making those political moves, exporting their culture, so on and so forth. If these two people come together, these particular native minorities who look to these immigrant minorities and say, hey, how are you guys taking advantage of these opportunities? Let me watch your movement, so on and so forth. Let me make certain, establish trust, frictionless transactions start occurring, blah, 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 blah. And then the new immigrants come in and be like, I see you guys are very good at this culture thing in terms of like, exporting your culture, in terms of agitating for positions in the media. And there's this whole kind of branding and marketing aspect that you guys are good at. I want to brand and market myself. I want to create a chain of Nigerian restaurants. I want Nigerian, kaftans or whatever, those kinds of clothes to become well known. How do I do that? Okay, how do I do this marketing, branding, dignity, esteem, media, politics thing? Rather than fighting each other, you just got to understand that you guys are doing different things. You're going to be good at different things. And rather than fight each other, how about those of us who have their head on straight? Because we're not talking about every other idiot out there. Those of us who have our head on straight can see, oh, okay, that's the thing you're doing. This is the thing I'm doing. Okay. Let's establish some trust, because that's absolutely key, right? Establish some trust, establish networks, my people, introduce my people to your people. Tell your friends to call my friends, we can be friends. That way, we can bring these two things together and really harness the strengths of each group. This is not easy to do because, as we talked about in my last stream with Jay Ibrahim, when we're talking about bringing these different African tribes together, the genetic component of, in other words, these psychological, especially when it's unconscious, like the genetic one, or when it's unconscious, like you don't even really know that you're trying to separate yourself from the other minority groups. You don't really know because you're not very conscious of it. So you don't even really understand what you're doing, and so on and so on and so on and so on. But these things need to be done, okay, even though it's by those whom understand. Those whom understand can create the pathways, can till the soil, okay? Jay Ibrahim and myself mentioned last time that you're going to need philosopher king types whom will take action and do the violence necessary. I like using the word violence just for action because you're going to need to till the soil. You're going to need to break some eggs. You're going to need to ruffle some feathers, right? And say, I know that this needs to be done whether or not people understand, because people are not going to understand writ large. Only a small percentage of people ever understand anything. So those whom understand the game that is being played, okay, and are willing to take action to bring groups together, to create the networks by which these things can begin to take hold and people can develop. Because, again, as I just used the example of the branding of Africa, for example, like, how come there is no, like, because you have like Italian food, for example, you get me, it's like Chinese food, like, where is the well, how about West African food or West African clothes and so on and so forth? That is a marketing, branding effort that people, established minorities within America, for example, are good at doing, playing that marketing, branding, again, higher up in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs type stuff, dignity, esteem, media, politics type stuff. These things can be done. These things should be done in terms of harnessing the strengths, if you will, of each group. Because, again, the fresh immigrant is focused on the economics. He has to focus on the economics. Someone has to do it, and they get very good at it as a result. And others can learn from that, use that, so on and so on. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, it's not going to be a long one. Going to wrap up with a little bow on things. And once again, shout out from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I'll show you guys some videos of the location I'm in. Pretty sweet location. Of course, as you've come to expect, why wouldn't I be at a sweet location? Okay? When Emeka or Ling Ling play politics, they play the politics of respectability. Can I get a one in the chat if you guys know what the politics of respectability is? The politics of respectability is the politics that you need to play in order to be accepted by the dominant group. Simple, right? It says, okay, you know, I carry myself straight, I walk a certain way, I keep my powder dry, I focus on my education, and I'm industrious in this and that, and I'm a respectable person. That's the politics that I play, the politics of respectability. It's not the politics of agitating for rights. It's not the politics of saying do you guys know what I mean by the politics of respectability? But it is that simple, right? It's just another way of saying, a way of agitating for, hey, there's a super chat from It's Okay to Be Happy. Thank you very much for the $3 super chat. Much appreciated. So that is, writ large, the politics of the immigrant. They're going to play the politics of respectability. I wear ironed shirts and I follow the rules and I'm not going to agitate for anything. Just let me get my bread, let me buy my land, and so on and so forth. After all, that is what I'm here for. So again, first generation immigrants are focused on the lower needs of Maslow's hierarchy. This tends to be a big source of consternation and misunderstanding between them and other minority groups in the society, other minority groups that are established, that are native, because they always wonder, how come these people are not with our political program? How come they're not with our media, branding, marketing? In other words, higher level, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, need stuff. Well, I say give them at least 3 generations, but I say, hey, while they're there focusing on the lower rung of things, remember that these people are actually very good at the lower rung of things, harness their skills, and they, at least those of them that are intelligent enough, can use your skills for the branding and the marketing, and hey, how do you guys get to do this and that and the other, and agitate politically and so on and so forth, right? Again, this is a question of degree. Different people will vary in terms of degree and also in terms of consciousness. But this is true, everything I just said, about every immigrant, psychologically speaking. There is an inferiority complex from being a minority. There is an inferiority complex from being someone who emigrated for opportunity. What is wrong with where you are from is the question that is always there, right in the back of every immigrant, that can always be raised by anyone at the drop of a hat. And that is often raised by many people, right? So there are all these subtle psychological ways in which they tend to compensate for this inferiority while trying to vie for position within the minority groups, appeasing and looking for acceptance in the dominant group, and so on and so on and so on, ladies and gentlemen. So with that, I would like to close this first stream of Addis Ababa. Bam! I just missed some other super chats. Vulcan says, Saloon King Guy, congratulations on your marriage, brother. May the Most High bless you both. Thank you. Nicer. Also, Claudie Pierre says, keep on the good job. From Montreal. So, Ike Malcolm X said, go to Japanese neighborhoods. Chinatown, Don't see black stores in black neighborhoods. You see every kind of store but black owned. That indeed is a good question, but a different topic for a different day. You know what, Nicer? I promise you I'm going to come back with Jay Ibrahim. I know you want Jay Ibrahim back because you like his accent and his voice. And in continuation of that thing about bringing the tribes together, I think this is a good aspect, okay? Because there is something about building those nodes, okay? Building those businesses. These individuals being trustworthy and competent enough that I can patronize them. So the whole point is this. I know it's only tangentially related, but it's part of the whole picture. Hey, black businesses, why don't you support black businesses? I support businesses that give me product on time, high quality, with good customer service, okay? this is not just an African American thing. In Africa, for example, people tend to waste your time. People have excuses for it. By excuses, I mean explanations. And I understand. There's a natural outgrowth of peoples who don't do the clock thing. Okay? And I experienced this in Africa, right, while I'm here. And I'm African too. That's why there's a question of like, it's always an individual kind of variation type stuff, okay? But I'm an outlier in many, many ways. There's almost no dimension in which I'm not an outlier, right? So, but generally speaking, Africans don't do the clock thing. I'm very much a clock kind of guy, right? So I've been pissed off many, many, many times while here with people just being lackadaisical about things, like, just wasting your time in general. So the same thing goes with quality of service and quality of product, on-time delivery, so on and so forth when it comes to businesses. Establishing these particular nodes whereby I can trust these businesses and then creating a network is super key. We were talking in my appearance in Bijou Noir's channel where I was talking about developing the nodes, or also in my channel here where I talk about the nodes are primary and networks are secondary. Developing those nodes and then having a way of connecting these nodes together whereby it's like this particular business is a trusted business. So if I say, hey, I want to patronize a black business, I don't have to worry about, oh my God, am I going to get crappy service? Are they going to waste my time? That kind of stuff. Because I don't want my time wasted. I don't care how black you are, or I don't give a damn. Okay? Hell no, I'm just going to give you your money because of some kind of cultural bullshit. No. Right? I don't want my time wasted. I want good quality product and so on and so forth. Okay? So there's certain issues that need to be resolved. I think I'm going to bring back Jay Ibrahim. We're going to talk about that kind of thing because it's absolutely key to bringing these different tribes that we were talking about together, because there needs to be trust. Trust in terms of what? Trust in terms of operating in a pragmatic, competent way, such that I don't have to think about, oh, well, is this person going to screw me out? It's like, no, I already trust this person, okay? Culture is a way of creating that kind of a trust, okay? But in the absence of that culture, right, how do you do it? You simply establish a system of vetting these nodes. First of all, you need to develop yourself. Whatever your skill is, right? In my nodes and network stuff, I talk about Young Swift developing his HVAC company, his mechanical engineering company, to the highest levels, right? So you establish that company at the highest levels. Somebody vets you, puts you in this particular network. Nothing magical, could just be a website, right? And then you have the clients also vet you. So there's two levels of vetting. There is the one done by the people who run this website, for example. And then there's ratings. We're all used to this. Amazon has ratings. Yelp has ratings, right? So if I want to patronize somebody, I can know that, hey, this person has been vetted, rated, and so on and so forth. Because what tends to happen is a low level of competence, and I don't give a damn. I'm not just going to do things with you just because but having said all that, I'm still quite interested, and that's why I have these conversations, on how we can bring those people, dare I say, those of us, whom got our shit together, to be able to say, hey, this person over here, that's a good engineering company, that's a good plumber, that's a good HVAC person, this is a good business, all the way up to the highest levels, and so on and so forth. Connect these together, and let's rock and roll. So that is a way of answering your question, Nicer. And I think I will bring back Jay Ibrahim. Jay Ibrahim to continue that conversation. Nazarene Beats. I don't talk about my watch online, Nazarene Beats. We'll have to talk offline sometime. But again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for showing up. Thank you for the super chatters, the cash appers. Thank you, Vulcanus, for the $50 super chat. Much appreciated. Claudie Pierre, it's okay to be happy. Red Sings the Blues, and everyone else who contributed, okay? Talking about the immigrant mentality, the fact that being a minority gives you an inferiority complex, coming for opportunity, gives you an inferiority complex. There's other ways in which you take that inferiority complex and you flip it around as a way of compensating and so on and so forth. But understanding that also, the fact that they're focused on the lower hierarchy, on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is a way of understanding the immigrant so that you don't misunderstand them when they don't participate with you in political agitation, in self-esteem type stuff. The immigrant does not even understand what self-esteem means. Like, he's like, what are you talking about? I'm here for bread. I'm here for bread, for myself, for my family back there, and I got to establish something over here. I am the pioneer. I came here to establish something. Self-esteem has nothing to do with anything that I'm about, right? And this hinges on many other topics, and that's why I kind of came up. But I'll be back with Jay Ibrahim, and we're going to talk again about how to bring these nodes together, these separate individualistic tribal peoples, indigenous peoples. And the main thing is to be able to trust these people, individuals, groups, tribes, and so on and so forth. How do we do that? And how do we overcome the barriers of this lack of competence and time wasting and all this stuff, which is real. It's real. Got my time wasted over here. I don't want my time wasted. I'm not going to be patronizing these businesses anymore. That's just what it is. Indeed. Thank you for the super chat. And sorry, I can't put the super chat up on the screen. Issues. $10 says thanks. Understanding on both sides should be established. All right, so I will be back now that I've tested the internet out here in Ethiopia, and the Addis Ababa internet seems to be working out well. I will be back perhaps with Jay Ibrahim if I can get him to, if I can catch him when he's not in one of his private jets somewhere, or having some festival in one of his tents with his golden draped camels and stuff. Maybe we can continue our conversation on how he, the philosopher king himself, Jay Ibrahim, can help establish certain groundwork, networks, systems. He's very much a systems builder type, so that we can all benefit from this. So shout out to you guys. It's been a pleasure, and until next time. Let's see here. Interesting.
On the shore, relentless in the war, the legions in our hearts, shed waters in our balls, the spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest, the cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand, stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demons searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand, stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. The world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you're lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within.